Thank you so much for sharing your time with us here on So Jannelle. Happy Sunday to you if you're watching on TFC. Happy Saturday if you're watching on ANC. And happy Monday if you are watching on KNET 25.1 in Southern California. We are on demand on I Want TFC, and we are always on our So Jannelle TV social media platforms. Today on the show, introducing you to Bianca Bustamante and also getting to know her better. Such a beautiful, inspiring Filipina that's putting the Philippine flag on the map in terms of racing and F1 racing, no less, right? Bianca, earlier we talked about the journey, right? And you know, no journey is complete without hardships and difficulties. You mentioned about the sacrifices. You're only 18 now, you still have a long way to go. But when you look back, you've already accomplished so much and you've already sacrificed a lot. What would you say would be maybe your top 3 biggest sacrifices to get to this point?
I mean, I think before my own, I've always, had to really realize that my family had to live for me, and they really have. I mean, my dad had to move away from us to come to America to sustain, to even just put food in the table, and at moments that really tested our tenacity as a family together, because there was gonna be rough moments where we don't get enough money, where you don't have enough money for food, for allowance, and it always comes down to like talking to yourself and really asking if it's even worth it. But I've always had my parents that really believed that I had what it takes, so they were willing to risk it all. And on my dad's side, he worked 7 days a week, 3 jobs, and that's the reason why I was able to push through. And my mom is, I would say, one of my strongest role model, because I think she was a very tough woman, and I think I got that toughness from her. I hope so. I mean, I think it's one thing to to be a wife, but it's another to both be a mom and dad to me and my brother. In moments where she kind of just had herself to raise the 2 of us, and my brother, he has autism as well and Down syndrome, so growing up, we always had to go back and forth to the hospital to do surgeries, just to, help him. And in some ways, my mom, often she's by herself, and, I was very young as well. So I think the fact that she was able to push through all of that and raise, a woman like me, I think I know that she's very proud of me, and I'm quite happy that I was kind of like woke in instances like that, where I think it's very normal for families to go through rough patches. And because for me, I have no lie when I say that, there's times where, we have some fights, and there's times where it's sad, you feel so down, even a bit depressing, and especially going through the pandemic. And I think those are the struggles that we really faced, but regardless, they've been the backbone of my journey.
I like that. I also read an interview where you talked about your dad sleeping in the garage many times in the US,
yeah,
so that he could save whatever rent he had to pay to send back home for you.
Yeah, I think my life is a bit of an epitome of it's a very Filipino family. My dad is a typical OFW. Yeah, really all he wanted to do was work 7 jobs, and then on a Sunday, he delivers the money back to Philippines so I could, buy the fuel, put in the entry fee, and just live a comfortable life racing. Because I think it's a misconception where people often think that racing is such a sport reserved for people with money, but not really realizing that, for one thing you love, there's always a lot of ways to achieve it.
Right.
And, through us, it was the love of my dad for me and for racing, and my mom as well, that really helped me power through. I mean, yeah, I can't imagine the amount of times where my dad would, eat cup noodles or this and that just to save the money. And really, it matters so much because I knew that he was dedicated as much as I was.
Right, right. You also made sacrifices on your own. You were homeschooled, sacrificed a lot of time, sacrificed friendships perhaps, sacrificed time to play.
Yeah.
Because you, in a way, you just dove into this and was really committed.
Yeah, I think, personally, to be committed to one thing so early on in life, it doesn't allow you much freedom. I think I was very locked out, mentally, and also my heart. I was very locked pretty much my whole childhood. I mean, I didn't get to experience a lot of things growing up. Like most of the things I experienced just now, actually, like going on field trips, having sleepovers, like all those things, or having a crush in high school or stuff like that. Like the little things, and sometimes we kind of take it for granted and not really realizing that there's some people out there that wish that they got to experience that as well. And I think that was me growing up. I've always had to worry about what I intake as an athlete, and being 7 and then thinking about if this is healthy, if this is good, will this make me fat, and this and that. I think it changes something inside you. And I think I just had to switch where I had to be mentally mature. I had to be disciplined. I think, discipline takes you far in life. And that's one thing I was very fortunate to learn so early on as well. I had to be very disciplined with my schedule. I had to wake up at 6 a.m. I had to go train. I had to go to the racetrack. I had to come back home, wash my things. And, all of this, nothing was handed in a silver platter. And in hindsight, unfortunately, I wasn't able to live a normal childhood, I would say. I grew up at the racetrack. I was surrounded by mechanics, engineers, pretty much my whole life. I'm used to staying up late at the racetrack as well. I'm used to eating with the mechanics and the team. And I was surrounded mostly by men, which was unfortunate. So I think that's also one little downside from myself, is that I never really learned how to make girlfriends, best friends, like going on shopping, watching movies together, and those stuff. Which even now I'm just like super excited whenever I do have the chance to hang out with some friends and this and that. But yeah.
But now you have your life too, and here you are living your dream. But there was a time when you actually didn't. There was a time when you actually thought your journey was over during the pandemic. Tell us about that. And I've read articles about that, and interviews that you've done about that. And it must have been heartbreaking for you to say, your lifelong dream, and during the pandemic, you couldn't afford it with time, you couldn't afford it with money, it was difficult, and that you had to stop, you had to retire when you still haven't peaked.
Yeah. It like makes me so emotional just thinking about it. Like it only happened about 2 years ago, so It's still very fresh in my mind, knowing a lot has happened since then. But looking back, it really was a very, very tough moment. My dad was, forced to come back home to Philippines, and he was there for a long time. So meaning that we didn't really have any income, and I think that was, one of the main reasons why we really struggled. We even struggled to get food. Most of the times we were just relying on like food from the government or ayuda minsan. And I think it's something that I could never hate my parents for. Like, I think it's very easy to say, sana mayaman na lang tayo, di sana tayo naghirap. I think a lot of kids often have that mentality when they're not given something that's, above and beyond. And for me, I learned that I really can't take anything for granted, because it can easily be taken away from me. And it was during the pandemic. Because of this, I wasn't able to race. So I was forced to retire from racing. For 2 years I wasn't driving, and really I just feel like my whole world just came crashing down. Like I just didn't know who I would be if I wasn't a racing driver. I think I had that kind of moment as well, where I kind of had just lost. I didn't know who I was, because I live and breathe racing.
Also, you've built your whole life
yeah.
toward this goal, and then all of a sudden you were walking away. What was that decision like? Did you make it yourself and then told your parents, or did you sit your parents down? Did you talk about this, or was this something where you were fighting? Was this a fighting moment? What was it? Take us through that. And I want you to do that, because then it makes all the victories after, so much sweeter,
yeah, so
right?
sweet. Yeah, I mean, that's why I think I really learned to really value every single win in life. You know, even if it's a tiny wins, I learned to celebrate it because, I mean, yeah, I built my whole life around racing. I mean, I made all the sacrifices. I did what I could. I mean, I pushed as much as I could to win, and it still wasn't enough. You know, it was just like taken away from me, and there was nothing I could do to fight back. I mean, I tried, I asked for help, I wrote letters to teams and really just was knocking on people's door, asking, you know, if he could support me, but it really just didn't work out because, you know, I understand that as well, that during the pandemic, you know, sponsoring a driver is not really a priority. So I think that's also what helped me really accept that, you know, I have to prioritize now my family, also my future, and if racing is no longer an option, that I think it's just something I have to accept.
Did you tell your parents? Did you sit them down? Was it a family meeting?
Yeah, it was, I think it was just over dinner, and then we were just talking about some of the races I've done and, you know, just reminiscing through the wins because, you know, I was Asian karting champion just before the pandemic came. I won the title and I really thought I was going in a very, you know, upward slope trajectory, you know, win after win. And then the pandemic came and there was a lockdown. And so, yeah, we were just speaking and then I told him that I was like, maybe it's time to really acknowledge, you know, the current situation, which is the fact that I don't think I'm going to be able to race anymore. And, you know, my parents, there wasn't really much they could do but just console me, I guess. They knew that I was very mature and disciplined, that I was able to take it. You know, I've experienced a lot of defeats in life, but yeah, this one really did hurt for a moment. And so yeah, I was just living my life normally. I was studying, and for a few months, I felt so lost. I had a very down moment in my life, and I wasn't eating well. I lost about 8 kgs. I think I was 45 kilo. I was underweight. I just didn't know what I would do if I wasn't an athlete. Like, I wake up at 6 a.m. unconsciously knowing that I have to train, I have to go and lift weights, but I don't need to anymore because I'm not a racing driver. And, you know, you kind of build all these habits as well throughout the day, you know, like to check on races, to watch some onboards, but then you have nothing to prepare for anymore. It's like you lost all your value in life. And for a few months, I did live that. And I think that's also why I enjoy so much now whenever, you know, I live this life I have now.
Right. We're gonna pause. We're gonna take a pause from this story, but there is a happy ending, and we'll talk about that when we return on the show. Don't go away.